Welcome to Notes from the North with Kyle and Sam.
Well, welcome to Notes from the North, the official podcast of the Vikings Gazette. We're proud to partner with Vikings Territory, Purple PTSD, and Purple Territory Radio. If you're looking for great Vikings coverage, be sure to stop by these sites, and you're always welcome at the Vikings Gazette. With that being said, let's get to first down. And Kyle, there's been some stuff that's happened since we last chatted a couple weeks ago. Free agency has been making some things move here.
Yeah, it's been exciting. I expected the Vikings to sign one relatively top tier player. I'm surprised that they were able to do two. They got two pretty good free agents. Dalvin Tomlinson, defensive tackle, and Patrick Peterson is a corner. And so the emphasis, obviously, is on defense. And so you get Dalvin Tomlinson is obviously a little bit younger. I believe he's 27, and he's coming off his rookie deal. So this is exciting in that he was a second-round pick for the Giants, and I think he played a lot of nose tackle, a lot of one technique. With the Vikings, he's going to be tasked with playing three technique, which traditionally it's going to be someone who's a little bit smaller. So Tomlinson is a little bit of an odd choice for that position, but the partnering Tomlinson with Pierce, it's going to be what would seem to be a pretty formidable pair on the interior, and it should make life easier for the linebackers. Anthony Barr and Eric Kendricks should have a lot more room to operate and contribute. I would think both, run defense especially, but maybe even as blitzers. So Dalvin Tomlinson, it was a surprising move in that he's not a traditional three technique, but he's one where it might actually end up working out quite well. And so I think it's exciting in that he certainly seems to be someone who, I watched his press conference yesterday, and he's a charming guy. Like, he seems to have a really good head in his shoulders. He was actually recruited by Harvard to play, to go and study there, but then also to play for the football team. And he chose Alabama instead. But he's someone who, he's a good player, obviously, but he's also been nominated. He was the Giants' Walter Payton Man of the Year nominee one year. So he's super involved with his community, super involved with charitable work. He's played every single game since being drafted, hasn't missed any for injury. So you got a guy who is probably underrated as a pass rusher. He's a very good defender against the run. Great character guy, super intelligent. He's still in the prime of his career. I just think there's a lot of upside with signing Tomlinson, and I think that's really exciting.
Yeah, I think that all the things you're saying there just seem just like key things. Like, this is, you said, a younger guy, good character. I think that's one of the things that, especially with the way football teams are designed and how many people are on these teams, you want to make sure you got good quality guys there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it sounds like you're relatively excited about this. Obviously, it seems like it's hard in free agency to be like, this is exactly what we need for exactly the amount of money we have, and it's going to work out perfectly. There's always a risk,
of course,
or for the most part, I guess I should say, there's usually a risk. But all in all, it seems like relatively impressed with this move.
I would say so, because I think, like you're saying, there obviously is a risk, and you're obviously worried in that to sign these guys, you need to spend big money. That's how free agency works. You got a guy who's, a relatively high-end player for his position, who's 27 years old, with great character and durability and all these things. Well, you're going to have to spend some money. But the way that they were able to structure it with the void years, he only hits the cap for about $6 million this season. And so it's, they're borrowing from the future salary cap to make it easier in 2021, which in 2023, maybe I'll regret the decision. But right now, it seems like quite a shrewd business move from Spielman. And I think just everything with Dalvin Tomlinson, nothing but impressed with what I've heard about him, read about him, when I listened to him talk. And Spielman referred to him as the quote-unquote big prize. Like, he was obviously a priority for the Vikings. And Spielman specifically mentioned, and Tomlinson mentioned this as well, in that, so yeah, he only had 3.5 sacks which actually would have led the Vikings last year, apart from Yannick Ngakoue.
Yeah,
And so
that's tough.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but he also mentioned how just the ability to disrupt the quarterback. So not necessarily getting the sack, but pushing back the guard, pushing back the center, getting into the quarterback's space a little bit, making them uncomfortable, taking away room to step up in the pocket, which therefore makes it easier for the edge rushers to get home. Of course, everything is interconnected on defense. And so I think the Tomlinson signing may end up looking really, really, really good in the end. And so I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's fantastic. And yeah, that kind of felt like the first big move in terms of a signing for them. And then
Yes.
late on the wire, we got Patrick Peterson coming into Minnesota, and doesn't feel like that was really on anyone's radar.
No, I think that came out of left field for everybody. I certainly wouldn't have guessed Patrick Peterson. He's definitely on the downslope in his career. I mean, he's been in the league for a decade. He was drafted in 2011. It's 2021, so 10 years on the dot. But I mean, the dude was drafted 5th overall. He had 4.3 speed when he was, which I'm sure he doesn't run a 4.3 anymore. But he was, a supremely gifted athlete. And at this point, he's probably lost a step, but man, brings good leadership and a ton of experience. He's coming off a rough year, but I would feel somewhat optimistic just in that it's only a 1-year deal. So it's not like you're married to this guy for the next 3-4 years, right? This is a 1-year deal. Ben Gosling from the Star Tribune was saying that's going to count for about $9 million against the cap, and so it's a reasonably sized cap hit, but again, it's not a crippling number by any means. And I think his ability to complement the other guys, the young players at corner, especially, I think it's going to be really good, especially since where Peterson's an outside corner, he's going to allow Jeff Gladney just to shuffle into the slot and play just slot corner rather than having to play both the outside and the inside. And so it's kind of a 2-for-1 deal in a sense, where the hope is that you get Peterson, who can be a good outside corner, but also will improve the slot corner play because Gladney can just focus exclusively almost on that. And so hopefully this has a bit of a domino effect.
Yeah, right. Because you had mentioned in the last episode about how one of the 5 positions to address this Peterson signing theoretically addresses one of those. And it seems like we talked about the offensive line, the defensive line, and those are obviously things that need to have some improvement.
Yes.
And so I guess corner it felt like it was a lesser extent, but things I've been seeing, it seems like there's a lot of, like you've mentioned it, a lot of hope for Peterson in terms of even mentoring some of these young guys. Like there's some real hope for some of these young corners that the Vikings have here, but they're really hoping for Peterson to come in and be that mentor role.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Like the hope is obviously that he can play well just as an individual, just, be a rock solid player on the field. Maybe not the elite player that he was a few years ago, but still be really good and then help to elevate everyone around him. And if he does that, then he's more than worth the $9 million that they're going to pay him.
Yeah. And so overall cap hit, I know you threw out some numbers here, overall cap hit that you would estimate for these two. I know there's details that are being ironed out.
Yeah, it might get adjusted a little, but I think the overall cap hit for these two, for Tomlinson and Peterson, is going to be $15 million this year, because I think Peterson's 9, Tomlinson's 6, and so even with my lack of math skills, I believe that equals out to 15. Which, and I realize you're borrowing money from the future, and so it's not that clean cut to just say 15 million. But for the purposes of just the 2021 cap, 15 million to get 2 impact starters for your defense.
Yeah, it's pretty significant. And as we transition a second down, it's almost confusing because I thought that the Vikings didn't have any money. I thought it felt like there was just, this was
Exactly.
I don't know where it's going to come from. There's no hope. We're in trouble. There's no money here. We're in trouble. Like we're not going to be able to get any big time players, and now we got 2. So
right.
So what the heck happened there?
Well, it's not that the It's not that the salary cap is imaginary. Some folks will say that it is. That's not entirely true. But the salary cap in the NFL, more than really any other league, provides for flexibility. You can just do so many things in order to shift and move money around. And so they're able to get actually very creative with, one, they obviously just cut players and that frees up money. They're able to restructure Adam Thielen, and that frees up money. And so they moved money around. They were able to sign these two players. They're also able to sign the linebacker from Cincinnati, and then they re-signed Rashad Hill and Chad Beebe, some in-house guys. And they're still going to be active. Now, in terms of right now, they're a little bit up against it because again, it's not the salary cap isn't entirely imaginary. There still are restrictions in place, and obviously a structure there. It's tough to kind of nail down exactly where they are. Ben Gosling said yesterday or 2 days ago, I believe, after the Peterson signing, that the Vikings should have around $7 million. But that was before the news emerged, or right around the time the news was emerging about Kyle Rudolph and his deal. And so rather than an outright cut right now, they've designated as a post-June 1 cut, which basically means that if they had just cut him right now, let's say, the Vikings would free up about $5 million in cap space, but they would take about $4 million in dead money. Okay, and so they would have a pretty significant dead cap hit, but you get that money right now when free agents are available. So that's one route. Right. What they've done instead is to designate as a post-June 1 cut. And so what that will do is on, I believe, June 2nd, they're going to get about $7+ million freed up on their cap. Now, it's not available to them right now. It only becomes available to them in June. But what that does, though, is it lowers the dead cap charge, and it's because it spreads it out over 2 years. Rather than that dead money hitting us all right now in 2021, there's going to be $1.5 million or so hit in 2021, and the other $1.5 million or so hit in 2022. And so I think that Minnesota's thinking is the reason why they're doing this, I think, is this will be the money that they use to sign their draft class. And so and of course, you don't want to go into a season so you have $182.5 million. You don't want to go into the season having spent $182.4 of your $1 million, and then you have like $100,000 left. Every team more or less wants to go in with some sort of cushion, at least a couple $1 million, so that inevitably when player X goes down with an injury and you decide a veteran to come in or whatever the case may be, you have a little bit of money to make those moves. And so the reason why it seems that they're making this adjustment now with Kyle Rudolph is that they're going to use this money to sign the draft class and then still leave them with a few bucks to kind of go into the season, which makes sense. The only issue is that right now it leaves them with a little bit less flexibility. And so where they still have holes on their roster and they still are flirting with some of these free agents, trying to bring them to Minnesota, you get a little bit less money in the immediate. And so it seems that the Vikings, as far as I can tell, I think they probably have less than $5 million to work with right now, which isn't very much. I suspect we're going to see news of perhaps a Harrison Smith extension in the next day or two, and maybe even Danielle Hunter, because I know that there's been a lot of stuff with Hunter. And I mean, there are ways, again, you shift around money, you borrow from future years, you convert to maybe a signing bonus or whatever you do to lower money in the immediate and then kind of backload it in some way. I mean, at some point, the Vikings got to pay this money. It's just a matter of, do we pay it now or do we pay it in 2023 or 2024? And I think Spielman and Zimmer and obviously the ownership are saying, okay, well, let's do it. Let's push some of this money into the future because the cap is going to be higher than it is now. A dollar means more now within the context of a $182 million salary cap than it does in 2023 when maybe it's 210 or 220. You have more room. And so not every dollar is created equal. And so it makes sense that they're pushing some of this to the future.
Right. It feels like they're pushing a lot to the future.
Yes, they absolutely are.
And it's like, I guess it's one of those things that you do want to see them go all in. Like you can't
Yes.
really kind of just dip your toe in and mess around. Like there's a plan and you want to stick to it. The Hunter and Smith extensions feel really significant in that, like, you got to make sure you take care of the stuff on your own end before you start looking elsewhere. It's almost like you got to take care of in-house stuff before you start trying to add outside. So that feels it feels significant. So with the limited amount of money there, what do you feel like remains? What do you see out there that potentially could still help this team moving forward?
Well, I think so. Sam, you mentioned just a few minutes ago the list of roster needs that we talked about a couple weeks back. And so we've addressed the defensive line, addressed corner. And so obviously, two of those needs have been taken care of. Obviously, the biggest need right now is on the offensive line. But then from there, you could also say that, safety is a really urgent need because you'll really only have Harrison Smith, who he's still an elite player, but, the guy's in his 30s now and they don't have a starter opposite him. And God forbid Smith were to ever get injured, we'd be in really big trouble. So they will need to, for sure, they will need to sign at least one offensive lineman and at least one safety, you would think. The Patrick Peterson signing is going to make it really difficult to bring back Anthony Harris, because I imagine Anthony Harris it's probably not going to be as big a deal as he had hoped, because there are a lot of quality safeties on the market and there's not very much money available because of COVID. And so even if Harris, goes for, a relatively cheap deal relative to what he's capable of, rather, he probably still is too expensive for the Vikings. But perhaps the Vikings will be looking at someone. I talked about Keanu O'Neil today, and I know that Arif Hassan actually just posted an article in The Athletic where he listed 10 players who might be a decent fit for the Vikings, who would be good value options. I know at safety he listed Kareem Jackson, who's with the Broncos, and then Jerron Harmon, who played for the Lions but also has a history with the Patriots. These would be fine options, and probably if it only costs you a couple $2 million-$3 million, it makes some sense to bring in a veteran safety for that price. From there, though, you would really like to have someone who can play guard, because we just desperately need someone. Chris Thomason just tweeted out not long ago that the Vikings apparently are one of the teams who is in conversations with Forrest Lamp, who played for the Chargers last year, so he could play guard. Admittedly, I didn't watch the Chargers play very much last year, so I'm not an expert by any means, but I'm not sure if I understand. I know he's a scheme fit, and that's important, but I'm not sure if I'm totally in love with the idea of signing Forrest Lamp, but we'll see. I would much rather see them sign the name escapes me now, is Austin Blythe. That's what the name is. He played for the Rams. And so I think there are a couple quality interior linemen who are available, even if they happen to be maybe centers as their primary position. I mean, Zimmer shuffles around his offensive line all the time. And so they're going to have to make a move here soon in these next few days, I imagine, to get an interior lineman and a safety. But I suspect that unless the extension for Harrison Smith comes through in the next day or two, now I should step back here and say Sam and we're recording this on Friday, and so this is going to come out on Monday. And so over the weekend, I'm sure some things will change, and perhaps over the weekend there will be an extension or two, or something were to happen, and maybe a signing or two as well. But at least from our vantage point, late Friday afternoon, it's clear that the Vikings still have work to do with the roster, but before they can actually get that work done, they're going to need to free up a little bit of cap room.
Yeah. No, they said things are changing every day, and we're recording Friday afternoon. Maybe we'll get to break some news, or you get to see an instant reaction if something comes through the wire here. But it's a fun time, and there's a lot of work. This is it sounds like people within management are busy right now.
Oh yes, yeah.
Before we transition to third down, I did see this tweet today about from at R and Ball on Twitter. I don't know if you saw this about Happy Kirk Cousins $45 million 2022 contract becoming fully guaranteed day for those who celebrate. So party time for Vikings fans.
Yes, I imagine a lot of folks aren't very happy with that, but I think this has been clear that this is Cousins is the man, and whether you're happy with it or not, he's the man in Minnesota. And so the question now is, how can we actually make it work?
Yeah. You know what? You can sit there and you can look in the past and think about all the stuff that could be, but this is what you got. And I was thinking actually even just yesterday, I was like you consistently want. You're always hoping for the top 5 at each position, and you can't get it. And to have Kirk Cousins, like you see some of the quarterback moves that are happening around here, and you see lots of the other options. And we're still on the Kirk bandwagon. It's not going to look good maybe in a little while, but when they win the Super Bowl this year, it won't matter.
Exactly.
So you talked a little bit about some of the holes, and obviously free agency is one of those avenues, but there is also the draft, and there is the ability for the draft to help out with some of these needs that you've talked about.
Exactly.
I know offensive, like you're putting a lot of faith in the draft with kind of hoping that someone from this draft class can fill that. I don't know if it's fair to say gaping. Maybe it's a gaping hole on that offensive line.
Huge hole. Yeah.
And so, but there is some hope there, and it's not like it's completely unforeseeable that something could happen there. But I know you said a couple weeks ago, Spielman indicated that he was putting together his plan for the offseason and suggested that his staff was evaluating roster needs and the strengths of both free agency and the draft. So how do you see the free agency signings impacting the draft? And that?
Yeah. It seemed that when Spielman talked about it a little while back, less than a month ago, he was kind of looking at the roster and what the roster needed to do to improve. And then he was kind of taking a holistic approach insofar as he was evaluating, okay, well, we've got, 2 primary ways of adding players to our roster, and that's free agency and the draft. And so we identify these needs and these weaknesses, and we're therefore looking to address them. Well, how do we do that? And it's going to be one of these 2 avenues. And so, the proof's in the pudding. The suggestion is that because they prioritized Tomlinson and Peterson, the suggestion is that Spielman and his staff and Mike Zimmer and his staff looked at free agency and said, okay, there's strength on defense. Fine. And then the suggestion from there, the hint from there is that there's going to be some strength on offense in the draft. And perhaps the Vikings are going to look to address those very obvious needs on draft day, or rather over draft weekends, rather than just because it's going to go beyond just the first round, of course, because we're more than just one player away from being a complete roster. I think it's pretty fair to say. But it does make me think that at 14, it's looking more and more likely that it's going to be an offensive lineman. And so Christian Darrisaw, Elijah Vera-Tucker, Rashawn Slater, these are names to keep in mind. I don't think Penei Sewell will fall, but if he does get around that 10 or 11 mark, perhaps the Vikings would jump up. I don't know. But it seems more and more likely that that's going to be the avenue that Spielman takes, rather than perhaps taking an edge rusher or another position. We'll see, I suppose. I also will add, because again, in line with this idea that we're not one player away from being, a perfect roster. Spielman, I think, did mention, he said something to the effect of he foresees there being, 3 or 4 quarterbacks being taken top 10 or top 12, and that therefore that pushes several really good players down to around that 14 range. And perhaps he was just acknowledging the obvious. I mean, that's obviously true. I'm kind of understanding that as his way of saying to the rest of the league, I'm open for business. And so these quarterbacks hop up into the top 10 because obviously everyone wants their franchise quarterback. Okay, fine, that makes sense. But that therefore pushes quality impact players down. Maybe some of those elite corners, these elite edge rushers, the elite wide receivers are maybe available at 14 that wouldn't otherwise be there. And I'm kind of seeing this as Spielman's way of saying, hey, there's going to be multiple tremendous players here. Give me a call. If your guy who you're in love with is here at 14 now, I'm open for business. I think is probably what Spielman is saying there, because he's pretty shrewd. He knows he chooses his words very carefully, and I think that I wouldn't be surprised at all if Spielman hops back into the late teens or maybe even into the 20s if it means picking up more draft capital in the second or third round.
Yeah, no GMs out there just no, I shouldn't say that's true, because there are some people that get in front of a mic and say some pretty dumb stuff.
Exactly. Yeah.
But when you're releasing information like that, there's a purpose for it. And
precisely.
So,
yeah.
As a fan, it feels like almost disappointing to think about your team moving back. It doesn't feel exciting at all, but multiple holes where they're at.
Exactly.
Are you okay with that?
I am, as long as it means. So if the difference is, having a chance to draft someone 14th overall to get this chance at perhaps getting a really excellent player to come in and contribute immediately, that's obviously very exciting. But if you trade 14 and maybe and I don't know if the numbers would actually work here, but just as a hypothetical, if that means you get the 25th pick and then the 50th pick, well, now I get 2 top 50 picks instead of 1 top 15 pick. And that's pretty exciting to me, in that you have now 2 really good chances of getting that high-end impact player rather than just 1. And I think that in a year like this, where COVID probably makes talent evaluation more difficult, having that extra chance within that top tier of prospects, that makes an awful lot of sense to me.
Right. Yeah, you're adding some more lottery balls to the system.
Precisely.
And it's easy. Well, as a fan, I'd suggest never looking back on trades unless your team wins on these, in terms of draft picks that you trade, or at least not focusing on the players that you gave up, and maybe just focusing on the players you bring in. Theoretically, it should work out 50% of the time, or a team will win that 50% of the time. But in terms of where the Vikings are right now and the holes and the needs, it does, as unsexy as it is, it does feel like it is a smart move. Is there anything else you wanted to mention on the draft?
No, I mean, obviously as free agency kind of, there's still a fair amount of news out in front of us for free agency. And so definitely there'll be more to discuss, but within the next few days, we're really entering into draft season. And so just stay tuned, I suppose. It's going to be interesting. I don't think that the Vikings necessarily are forced into drafting someone for need, but I think that the suggestion here, based off what Spielman has said, and the hints are there that they're going to be leaning offense early in the draft.
Yeah. Lots to look forward to. Lots of good things coming. So as we transition then to the odds and ends, our Minnesota Wild update.
Yep.
They're starting to establish a little bit of position in this playoff race. It keeps they keep pushing. Although as we record on Friday, I don't know if you saw last night the game against Colorado or saw that. That's a tough one. No team's going to be able to compete and have a solid. We'll normally 82, but they're not going to be able to be there for all 56 games. But I don't know if you saw the screenshot at 8:21 left in the first. The shots were 20-1 for Colorado.
It's like time of possession in football. If it gets like the end of the first quarter and one team had the ball for 14 minutes, it's like, well, of course the team who had held the ball the entire time is doing better.
Yeah.
It's just crazy. Yeah.
I was trying to think. I was like, the time of possession was kind of the the comparable that I felt was the closest.
Yeah.
Ended up losing that one 5-1 and outshot 55-20. Usually when you get outshot 55-20, the math on that's like basically 3-1. So that time of possession, that's 45 to 15 minutes. So if you're
Exactly.
So anyways, that one's in the past. They're doing well. Yeah, I was reading today, ESPN did an article on the midseason report cards. Minnesota scored well. They gave the players an A, talking about Kaprizov and some of these other forwards. And there's a few forwards on the team that are in this conversation for the Selke Trophy as the best defensive player, which is unsurprising as a defensive-focused team. Talking about the top four on defense are really solidified there with Brodin and Dumba and Spurgeon and Sutter. Gave Dean Evison an A-. Bill Guerin is the GM of B+.
Mm-hmm.
There is obviously, they mentioned just the dangers with the power play. It's never been a strength, and it's not doing so well right now at 8.1%. You're hoping for higher for that.
Yeah, that's ugly.
But overall, they were given an A, and so they're looking like they're going to be in the playoffs. It's super exciting. You can find that article over at ESPN. Greg Wyshynski and Emily Kaplan wrote that, but this is a team that we knew at the start of the season that they were kind of going to be pushing for that fourth spot, and and obviously they're in a strong division with some top tier teams here, but they are doing well, and I think it's a good time to be a Minnesota Wild fan.
Yeah, that's fair. I got, so these are two off the cuff questions here for Sam that we didn't prep for. I think one's quite easy, and I think one's probably not as easy. So I'll start with the easy one. It'd be fair to say that Kaprizov is the front runner for the Calder. Is that fair? Oh
yeah. Like there's been talk of Lankinen in Chicago as the goalie, but he was a little bit inflated because they got to play Detroit a lot, which is a little shot at Kyle because Detroit's his team. They suck. And so they showed some stats of his stats against Detroit versus everyone else, and turns out it helps your stats to play against Detroit. It's like playing against the Detroit Lions.
Yeah, that's right. It's like when a pass rusher goes against our O-line, and all of a sudden their sack totals are just through the roof.
Anyways, Kaprizov, I think, unless hoping, definitely not the case, but unless something happens, it's his to lose.
Okay, yeah, that was definitely my impression as well. So then you were just mentioning with the draft, it's exciting at 14 to say, to get this impact player. And with hockey, the NHL trade deadline's coming up, which obviously it's going to be more the logistics of all this is just more difficult, obviously, because of the pandemic. But it's very similar to maybe drafting that player. It's a very exciting trade deadline to bring in one, maybe two guys who can address deficiency. So maybe it's on the power play. Maybe you get someone, maybe a defenseman to be a power play quarterback, or someone who can, whatever the case may be, address some sort of deficiency on your roster. Or maybe it's tough to say, especially with COVID. Do you think the Wild are in a position where they could maybe look to add someone to, help them in this playoff push?
Yeah. So as you were talking, I pulled up Cap Friendly, which is kind of the hockey's equivalent to Over the Cap.
Yeah.
Minnesota's only got $370,000 in terms of cap space.
Oof. Okay.
And that severely limits a team. That's right. You're basically in a money in, money out situation there. Obviously prorated by that point, you're looking a little bit less. I don't know if there's any contracts. I'm looking at some of these guys. Like a team could be willing to take on some money going back. It means you have to give up more. So it's tough. My thought, and this is just honest, is that with the teams, especially Colorado in their division, you got to get out of your division. And I don't see that happening for them.
Right.
Something would need to happen for them to do it. And I don't think adding a player is going to do that, or a player or two. BC the way that they are going to win is by absolutely smothering teams on defense.
Right.
That's their best shot that they've got.
Yeah.
But as you're looking right now, like there's Vegas, there's Colorado, and there's St. Louis, and so they have to beat, if they're going to make the playoffs, they're going to beat two of those teams in a playoff series. And the way they're constructed, like you always want to give team a chance and add a piece, but my inclination would just be you probably just roll with this team. There's some young pieces there that are getting some good experience, although it is still an old team. So I'll say this: I wouldn't be surprised if they go for it, but I don't see a piece that they add helping them push them over the top to getting where they would like to be in terms of getting out of this West division.
Yeah, I think that's entirely fair. Like I just can't imagine that they would, sell the farm to bring in, and even with what you're saying about with the salary cap, obviously in hockey, it's way more rigid, the financial structure, than it is in the NFL. And so even the flexibility to do that, it's going to be difficult. And then with COVID, and so I think Sam's probably bang on there. As the benefit here is for some of these guys like Kaprizov to get that experience probably.
Yeah, like they do have some picks to work with. Like they've got the Pittsburgh's first and third from two different trades, from the Zucker trade, and I'm not exactly sure the details on the other one. It's Pittsburgh pick that they got from San Jose last year at the deadline, and then when Minnesota traded Ryan Donato this year, that's where the pick came from. But yeah, the cap space is certainly a piece that this is just an impact in these sports and football and hockey. It limits your ability to do this, and you just kind of have to work within the system that you're given.
Right. Fair enough, man.
Yeah. I will say for Minnesota Wild fans, their retro jersey is easily top 3 in the league, if not the best. I like Colorado's. I don't know if you've seen them. While we're on retro jerseys, Detroit's is easily the worst.
We're not the worst. I don't know if we're as nice as the Minnesota Wild. They look pretty snappy.
Do you like the Detroit Red Wings
retro
jerseys? Really?
I'm very, very biased, but I'm not anti Detroit retro jersey. I think they look quite sharp.
Right. So if you hold up the Detroit Red Wings retro jersey and you hold up their practice jerseys, it's the same picture. For anyone that hasn't seen it, if you just Google NHL practice jersey, and that's the Red Wings jersey. It is. I think it's the worst. Although for someone that really likes simplistic design, I guess you can make an argument, but I disagree. Anyways, Minnesota Wild's jerseys look great. After I trashed your team, are you ready for some words of wisdom for?
Yeah, I'll try and be gracious here with the words of wisdom. Instead of maybe just pivot to insult Sam, but maybe I'll stick with the original plan. So Gideon. So I usually these words of wisdom are just based off my own personal devotions, whatever I've been reading about in the Bible. Saying last time, it's always a hop, skip, and a jump to try and make it connect to football in some capacity. But if you're to go back into the Old Testament and read about Gideon, he's a pretty interesting guy. So God calls him to do some stuff. I don't know if that's a accurate theological term, but
I love it. Yeah, that works.
Yeah. God calls Gideon to do some stuff, and there's some serious doubt and fear on Gideon's part. And I think that when I think of Gideon, at least, I just think of the triumph and the courage and leading Israel. But before that, he actually goes to God several times, looking for confirmation, looking for signs. There's serious kind of doubt and concern on his part. And so the hop, skip, and a jump, there is some concern and doubt amongst Vikings fans right now about the fit of some of these players that we signed, Tomlinson and Peterson. Surprising moves. But perhaps as with Gideon, let's have a little bit of faith here. And let's see. Gideon went on to do some great things. Perhaps, though admittedly in a far less important
You got to really hold on to there's a certain section of Gideon's story that is great, and don't look at the before and don't look at the after.
Yeah, right. Our Vikings may go on to do great things. Perhaps we'll see, and perhaps the doubt will just be a little part of that story.
Yeah, we'll just focus on there's a good few verses there, but Gideon, like you said, they're at this point we're at the hope stage and the trust stage, and you just kind of have to roll with it and see what happens.
Exactly.
Yeah. Anyways, we want to thank you guys all so much for listening. Be sure to stop by VikingsGazette.com for great Minnesota Vikings news, commentary, and analysis. And the Vikings Gazette can be found on Twitter and Facebook at Vikings Gazette. Thanks so much for listening, and we will talk with you in a couple weeks.